In a quiet town, there is an old homestead where a strange legend has emerged about a mysterious red stool. This stool is said to be left over from the Republic of China period. It is covered by the dust of time, hiding unknown secrets. The residents of the town were filled with fear and awe at the red stool. It is said that as long as someone sits on this stool, there will be ghosts. And when people turn their heads and look at the ghost, terrible things will happen. A young adventurer named Li heard the legend and became intrigued by the mysterious red stool and decided to experience it for himself to solve the mystery. Late one night, Li Ming sneaked into the old mansion, which was filled with a ghostly atmosphere. He walked carefully through the corridor and finally found the legendary red stool. Thinking of the legends he had heard, he hesitated for a moment and finally sat on it. For an instant, he felt a chill through his body, as if a pair of cold hands were holding his shoulders, and he did not dare to look back, afraid to see the true face of the ghost. However, curiosity overcame fear, and Li finally turned his head. The moment he met the ghost's eyes across the room, suddenly plunged into darkness. Li Ming tried to escape, but he found that his body seemed to be bound by an invisible force. Unable to move, the ghost's face was pale as paper, and his eyes showed endless sadness and resentment. Her hair was disheveled, like withered grass blown by the wind, and her lips were eerily purple, trembling from time to time, as if telling his pain. And her expression was grotesque and twisted, revealing deep anger and despair. The woman's voice seems to come from the underworld. "Why do you want to sit on this stool?" Li trembled in horror. She tried to explain why she had come, but his throat seemed blocked by something and he could not make a sound. As the ghost's anger grew stronger, he began to move closer to Li. His hand reached for Li Ming's neck. Li felt more and more difficult to breathe and his eyes began to freeze. Just when Li Ming thought he was going to die, suddenly, a strong wind swept through the whole room, and a shrill cry was faintly heard in the wind. His body twisted in the wind, as if pulled by an invisible force, his arms flailing, trying to break free, and a shrill cry emanating from his mouth. A cry full of pain and unwillingness. When the wind stopped, Li found himself moving, and both the red stool and the ghost disappeared without a trace. He stood there in a daze, filled with doubt and fear. Li, who returns home confused and disturbed by the experience, decides to delve into the history of the mansion. By going through archives and questioning older residents, he gradually uncovers a previously unknown past. Originally in the Republic of China period, the owner of this mansion was a wealthy merchant. She had a beautiful and tragic daughter. The daughter fell in love with a poor boy, but the businessman did not agree with their love, forcibly separated the two. The desperate daughter ended her life on this red stool, and his resentment lingered for a long time, turning into bitterness, and his appearance seemed to be looking for some kind of relief or revenge. Li is deep in thought. He does not know what this ending means, whether the girl's spirit of resentment has been calmed, or his curse will continue. Li has been obsessed with that horrible experience. He decides to go back to the mansion to find the answer. When he stepped into the mansion, a strong chill came over his face. He carefully walked into the room. The red stool appeared again, and Li sat on it slowly, waiting for the roller to appear. But this time nothing happened, and he felt a pang of confusion. And just as he was about to leave, suddenly he heard a faint sound, coming from under the red stool, as if something were struggling. Li bent down and looked closely at the bottom of the red stool. He found a hidden hole where the sound was coming from. He found a tool and carefully opened the hole, which turned out to be a sealed box. Li took out the box and opened it. Inside was an envelope. The owner of the diary was the woman. The diary records the woman's misery and her resentment towards the world. It turns out that his death was not a simple suicide, but a terrible conspiracy. As Li reads his diary in shock, he discovers that he seems to be trapped in a larger mystery, and behind this mystery lies a horrifying truth. Just then, there was a sudden gust of wind in the room, a flickering candlelight of electricity, and Li felt a powerful force surge around him, his heart pounding. Suddenly, a pale figure appeared in front of him, not the rolling power of the woman, but a strange man. There was desperation and madness in the man's eyes. The man said, "You should not have revealed this secret. You must pay for it." With that, the man lunged at Li with outstretched hands. Li was terrified and wanted to escape, but he found that his body was bound again. Just as the man's hands were about to seize Li Ming, a shrill cry suddenly sounded in the room and the man's body stiffened and fell to the ground. Li, breathing heavily, looking at the man on the ground. The heart is full of great doubt. At this time, he found at the man's neck hanging a piece of jade. Jade engraved with a strange grape. Li picked up the jade piece and observed it carefully. Suddenly, he felt a powerful surge in his heart. He seemed to understand something. He stepped out of the house, clutching the piece of jade in his hand. He knew that the town was not as peaceful as it seemed, and that he had been drawn into a terrible vortex.